So spirit's always communicating to us, but it depends on where are we tuned. What's our satellite dish head tuned to? It's kind of like when you have satellite TV and there's a storm and the satellite goes out temporarily. Well, that show's still being broadcast. You're just not able to receive it.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to raise our vibrational level when we can, when we're grieving. We need to go through that, certainly. But those low vibration channels, when we feel badly, I call those the I feel crappy channels. And it's harder for spirit to communicate with us on the I feel crappy channels.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. Today we have a very interesting woman with us. She was inventor of medical devices that are used to this day around the world. She started several companies. She's now a medium and a medical intuitive. And so Sally and I are very happy to welcome to the show Julie Ryan. Julie, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks. I'm delighted to be with you both.
We're so thrilled to have you. And I'll be honest, you are a very active and prolific individual because you also have your own podcast that you've got going on a regular basis. You're a writer. You just seem to do all of it. And I'm really, really impressed with not only your energy, but your ability to communicate. And I find that for me, one of your greatest gifts is helping people with their own grief. You know, I know you do the medical intuitive work and all of that along with it, but more than anything, you teach people about who they really are and who their loved ones are when they're crossing the veil. So tell us a little bit about how you came to that kind of work.
Well, thank you for your kind comments. My goodness, I'm humbled with your compliments. I am a medical intuitive and psychic medium who learned how to do woo woo. I'm a businesswoman and an inventor, and I learned how to do all this stuff, you guys. I didn't have dead people chasing me as a kid, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. And so once we connect with spirit, we can do it all. And that's what I've discovered. I'm not so sure why everything is segmented and siloed into you got the medical intuitives and the psychics and the pet psychics and the past life people and all of that. I mean, it's all spirit, it's all energy. So when we connect into spirit, we have the ability to do all of the above and more. And that's what I teach people how to do as well.
Well, and I think that's again, it's what's so wonderful about you. And I'm going to say it wrong. You've said something along the lines of you're a smorgasbord or something of psychic ability.
Buffet of
Buffet.
psychicness.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost the same thing.
Yeah,
um,
exactly. So when I'm talking with somebody as a client, usually when somebody calls into my show, we do a live show every Thursday night, and people call in from all over the world. And we can talk to your dead grandma. I can scan your cat. We can see why your knee hurts. We can do past life stuff. We can get guidance on, career advice and love life advice and whatever. And so I call it my buffet of psychicness because we can talk about any one of a number of topics when I have somebody in a private session for an hour, which is just such a blast because we can cover a whole lot of space in a short amount of time.
Well, I forgot to mention in the intro, but I think Sally mentioned it. You're also an author. How
Yes.
now, do you have just one book or are there more?
7. Number
Seven.
eight's coming out here by the end of the year.
Okay.
So, yeah, but my first book, Angelic Attendants, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next is the best known one. And it talks about how we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets. And it even has illustrations in it that shows how the angels and the spirits and the pet spirits are lined up and what the configuration is. I've coined what I call the 12 phases of transition, and it's what everybody goes through. And then the graphics are in the book that somebody's in phase 9. Well, here's what phase 9 looks like. Somebody's in phase 2. Here's what phase 2 looks like. The interesting thing about it is we're all going to go through the 12 phases of transition regardless of how we pass, whether we die instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether we die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years from some disease or illness. And time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation, which is why we all go through the 12 phases of transition. So anybody that wants a free copy of the book, just go to julieryangift.com and we'll send you the free audiobook and digital version. We've got it in Spanish as well. We're translating it into several other languages that will be available. I think this stuff should be taught in the schools, which is why I give away thousands of them a year. So julieryangift.com, download the link, the free versions, share it with your family and friends, because this stuff, everybody's so afraid to die. There's lots of information about the afterlife, lots of information about near death experiences, but not so much about what happens as we're dying. And the most interesting part of this is science has caught up with woo woo, because university based research shows now that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. And I think most of us have thought, well, grandma was just hallucinating, or maybe it was the morphine. No, grandma could actually see her deceased mother's spirit that was in the room who'd been dead for 60 years.
Right. Well, and that's why I was saying early on that I'm so impressed with your ability to help people, not only through their own grief around their loved one's death, but you help ease people into their own transitions.
Right.
I had the benefit, the privilege of walking both of my parents through their transitions. I cared for both of them at their end of life. And my father did see my son come in the days before he transitioned. And I did hear my mother in my own head before her body completely finished winding down, you know? And so these are very real experiences. And you do such a beautiful job of helping people to understand how those things occur. So, with that little bit of background from me, how do you explain to people how these things occur? You talk about 12 transitional steps, no matter what kind of death it is. And so, how does that differ from somebody that goes very quickly and unexpectedly compared to somebody who has months or even years?
Well, as I just mentioned, we all go through the 12 phases, whether it's instantly or whether it's in a prolonged period of time. Everybody goes through the same thing because time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time is a human creation. So a nanosecond where somebody dies in the case of a homicide or a suicide versus somebody dying over 3 years in the spirit world, it's the same. It doesn't matter. That's hard for us to understand from our human perspective, primarily because we don't have a human frame of reference for that. But I love, Sally, that you saw that your dad saw your babies, your son's spirit that was in the room. That must have just made your heart sing.
It did, because my son had transitioned only 9 months before my father.
Oh, God
My
love
son
you.
passed at 17. Well, thank you. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to think about the whole experience in the moment. I had a lot of hope, you know,
Oh.
and that was a big shift for me
Mhm.
in my own experience. So,
Well,
I'm
and
grateful
to your
for it.
point as well, we're afraid to die. And when we're with somebody who's at the end of their lives, not only are we worried about them, we're thinking, oh my God, what's happening? Are they going to fly or are they going to fry? Kind of a thing. What's going to happen?
Right.
And at the same time, it makes us face our own mortality. I mean, there's no way we get out of this.
Yeah.
And when we're watching somebody die in person, when we're with somebody versus watching it in a movie or on a TV show, that's a totally different situation. But when it's someone we love, I always equate it to the Lady of Justice statue. She's got her scales and she's trying to balance it. Where we're balancing the heartbreak on one side from the human perspective with the spiritual side where it's glorious. And my goodness, it doesn't get any better than you're surrounded by angels and the spirits of loved ones.
A near-death experiencer friend of mine put it this way: dying sucks. Being dead is wonderful.
Oh, there you go.
So, so that I think we dread the possibility of pain at the end, and because nobody likes that. But so you've talked about the 12 phases going up to it. Are there phases once you make the transition?
Once we make the transition, those spirits that are in the room with us, I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. They are also on the other side of the pearly gates. So there's an exercise that I do, and my graduates of my class do with people who are afraid to die, and we call it the Walk to Heaven. And it's a dress rehearsal about how we're going to go through this plasma wall. That's the pearly gates, which, by the way, I've never seen St. Peter out in front of the pearly gates with a clipboard going, okay, you're allowed in. No, you got to go burn for eternity. I've never seen that happen. All spirits go to heaven. All dogs go to heaven, like the 80s movie. All people go to heaven too. And regardless of how awful they were when they were alive, that was a role they were playing, like an actor in a movie. And so we go through the plasma wall. As soon as we go through the plasma wall, all those deceased loved ones and pets are there waiting for them. And I will normally hear like a big hurrah, they're here. And it'll be a celebration. And then in the walk to heaven, that person's spirit that's disconnected from their body just for this exercise, they will go into the crowd of people and get hugs and kisses and lots of love. And then oftentimes I'll have to like reach my hand in there and pull them out and say, okay, we got to go back. We got to reattach to your body. This is what's going to happen when you transition. And inevitably, it will solve their fear. I have often throughout the years had people say, okay, can we do that again? And so, well, I've had a couple people even where we turned immediately around and they wanted to see it right away again. And then they passed usually within 24 or 48 hours because it alleviated the fear.
I always tell people you'll be able to find me. I'll be the one with numerous dogs and cats walking down a wooded trail, and numerous dogs and cats in tow behind me. So yeah, it's going to be wonderful when it happens. Not in a rush. Nobody ever wants to die.
That's right.
They all want to go to heaven, but it's like, we could, but not right now.
Not today.
Yeah.
Let,
So
let me ask you a tangential question to all of this then, because it has been a topic that Gary and I have discussed every now and then. How do you understand the differences in things that people perceive when they do cross over? How much of it is connected to their belief systems? How much of it is connected to what they, think might happen if they've lived a challenging life? Do they experience something challenging because they expect it? What have you heard on that topic?
Well, it's different with NDEers versus spirits that are in heaven who've passed. It's a different experience. The NDEs I equate to a type of a hallucinogenic experience where the person experiences a different realm and they're going to interpret that information based on their human frame of reference. Most NDEs that I know of, anyway, through clients and graduates of my class and ones I've read about, are pleasant Every now and again, there are some that are unpleasant. And that's the filter through which that information's being downloaded and through which that person is perceiving it. All spirit communication is numeric, it's in numerals. And it comes into our heads, and then our heads act as a decoder, our brains. And it's going to be decoded based on our human frame of reference. So I had a client recently who said, "Oh, I had this spirit in my room and it scared the daylights out of me. And I told it to leave. And it was just this ball of white light, but it had kind of like a gray border around it." And so we did an instant replay because, again, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So we go back and forwards, front and back, that kind of thing. And I said, "Well, that was your guardian angel." And she was mortified. She said, "I told my guardian angel to leave." I said, "Well, your guardian angel knows that it was scary for you because it was the first time that you've been able to perceive its energy." And when we don't understand something, we go into fight or flight. It's an autonomic nervous system response because the body doesn't know any differently between what's real and what's fake when it comes to fear. And when we're in fear, we lose clarity because the blood drains from our brain, goes to our heart and our extremities so we can run away faster. And our stress hormones are up. So we're not thinking clearly. So I said, next time it happens, you'll know what it is. And if a spirit ever shows up, just say, "Hey, who are you? How can I help you? Do you have a message for me?"
Yeah.
Most people, because we've all been conditioned to do that with the movies and the books and, all of that. And I just say, just ask them, "Hey, who are you? How can I help you?" Kind of a thing. Whereas, to continue answering your question, Sally, somebody who's already transitioned and has actually died and is in heaven, it's all pure love. All spirits are pure love. There's nothing evil, there's nothing scary. It's all pure love. But when somebody comes in and a human can perceive them and it scares them, well, then their brain's just off to the races. I have a fun story about that. May I share it?
Please.
Please.
One of my girlfriends was telling me that an evil spirit came in or was trying to come in her house one day. And this was before I knew her. And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And so I could do an instant replay and I could see in my mind's eye, I'm like watching this movie of what's happening. And she lived in a home with double wooden doors and they were really thick. They were heavy. Like when you go through a heavy front door and it's like, God, how do you open this thing? So when the spirit was coming in, it looked distorted, similar to back in the day when the bank robbers would put a pair of pantyhose on their face, to make it harder to identify who they were, to distort their features. That's what was happening with the spirit. Because you think about spirit's just energy and it's moving through this dense wooden door. So it's looking like a bank robber with pantyhose on its face. And so it came in, and my girlfriend had an umbrella stand next to the front door, and one of her son's golf clubs was in there. So she got the golf club, and she was getting ready to swing it at the door, and she said, "You get out of here right now. You're not welcome in my house." And it left. I said, "Really? Did you think that you were going to be able to damage the spirit's energy?" It's like, batting at air. Anyways, we talked to the spirit as I was able to communicate with it. And well, we found out that he was a Civil War soldier who died in battle and he was looking for his little daughter. Well, his daughter had reincarnated as my girlfriend's daughter. And we got the soldier's name, we got the daughter's name, we got where they lived, when they were born, all of that. And we were able to validate all of it with historic documentation online.
Oh, that's great.
So that's an example of her being scared out of her mind that this evil spirit was coming through her front door when actually it was really a loving and fun and interesting experience.
And it sounds like your friend had some untapped mediumistic abilities as
Oh,
well.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We all do. I think we all have it. Most of us have trained it out of ourselves.
I completely agree.
But go ahead, Sally.
Oh, well, I was going to say that I find that to be very commonly true as well in my experiences, that I've really never, even if I have felt like perhaps there was a spirit that was coming into my space that I was not prepared for and had not invited, I don't make an assumption that there's evil intent necessarily involved. That said, people are people, and do you find that they change dramatically because they've dropped a physical body, or do they retain some of their belief systems or their confusions or their and maybe mental illness or any of those things after dropping the body? Or do you find that they're completely changed?
Well, they're pure love, and all spirits are pure love. So when somebody says, well, I don't want my mother's spirit around me when I'm dying, she was just awful. She's like the last person I wanted around me. And I say, look, that was the role she was playing. Her energy, her spirit is pure love. So what I find is that they will communicate to us in a way with information that will let us know it's really them with whom we're conversing. It's been my experience that every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. And in order to get in touch with someone who's in spirit form, whether that spirit's attached to a body or not is irrelevant. Whether you knew the spirit when they were in human form is irrelevant. Our heads are like big satellite dishes. You just think of them. You think of your grandmother. You think of Napoleon. You think of Moses, Elvis, whoever you want to talk to. And that tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency. It's also irrelevant whether or not they've reincarnated. I had somebody last week, a client, say to me, well, I would love to talk to my grandmother, but she's been dead 25 years. I'm sure she's reincarnated by now. And I said, that doesn't matter because her spirit stays the same. And that spirit's going to communicate with us in a way that we're going to know it's them. So that spirit, through all their lifetimes, is going to communicate with us in the lifetime that we lived with them. If they're communicating with somebody else, they'll use frames of reference to convey that it's them to that person. Let's say they lived in ancient Egypt, during the Pharaoh's reigns. Well, the family member or the person with whom they're communicating who knew them in that lifetime will understand that that's them through the references that they use. Does that make sense?
Yes. And something I always say, Julie, is and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems to set with me very well, is that even if you reincarnate, it won't be you. It's not you, Julie, it's not Sally, this personality self. That remains on the other side. But we have an oversoul or a larger perspective, and a fractal of that will reincarnate. So it's you, but it's not you. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. My understanding of that, Gary, is that I agree with you. We're all a fractal of the divine, and our spirit is just pure energy, pure love. We
Mhm.
assume different personalities, again, like roles that an actor would play in a movie. It's
Mhm.
also been my experience that the personality stays with the body when somebody dies. So, somebody who's a snarky mother in this lifetime is just a pure loving spirit in heaven, and the snarky mother part stays with the body and just disintegrates as soon as the body and the spirit separate.
Okay, so that said, then, how do we connect with spirits that are maybe, say, for example, your grandmother's been gone for 50 years and she has reincarnated? How do you connect with that aspect of her that is focused now into a new body with a new personality?
You just think of her, and that connects to her spirit's frequency, which always stays the same. And then you've got a two-way radio communication set up. So it's irrelevant whether she's reincarnated or not. There are many schools of thought that we live multiple lifetimes concurrently. And that
Mhm.
makes my head want to explode because I just do not understand that from a human perspective. And yet I think, well, I understand it when I'm back in heaven. Yeah. Is it feasible? Yeah. That satisfies me.
I,
The
I
short
kind of
run.
concur with that. I think that that because there is no time on the other side, there's only now. So everything is actually now. And I know we can't wrap our heads around it. Our linear
Right.
minds are not going to accept that. But you can get to a point where you sort of have a sense that that's the case. When you say there's no time on the other side, that sort of confirms that it's all time is now.
I do have an analogy that came into my head about multiple lifetimes concurrently. And that is, see what you guys think of this. That is when a movie is made in Hollywood, for instance, and let's say it was made in the 1940s. So it was real time when it was made, and then it's put on video, and then we're watching it real time now. So it's happening real time when it was made, and it's happening real time now. And so those are two different times that are happening concurrently in our human perspective, in our human reality.
I
That's
like
about
that.
as close as I've been able to get to trying to
I like
understand that.
it.
And the thing is, some of these things are not a requirement to know.
Exactly.
Right.
And
Right.
we will know when we get there. We'll be able to find the answers to these questions.
And I don't think we're supposed to know this stuff. We're supposed to have the human experience.
Though I will say, I think it's critically important that we learn about the afterlife while we're here. First of all, in your life, it eliminates fear.
Mhm.
I'm talking about psychological fear, not the bear is chasing me and I got to run. That's a different kind of fear. But I'm
Right.
talking psychological fear, the thoughts we entertain that are not good. And so not only does it do that, but it makes the fear of death certainly dissipate. So I think this is why we do what we're doing is the more people know, the better equipped they are to make that transition.
And that's what my book is intended to do, the angelic attendants. And may I share how this all came about?
Please.
This book? It's kind of a fun story. I was at my mentor's, this is probably 10 plus years ago. And when she's doing a healing on me, my deceased loved one's spirits are on either side of the table that I'm laying on. And I'm under a blanket and I'm all snuggly, and, she's doing an energy healing on me. So spirits are there. Even my dog, my deceased dog's spirit, Katie, her little paws are up. She's on her hind legs and she's there. Well, one day this spirit of this dead Pope shows up, and he's got his hat on and his shepherd's rod and the vestments and the whole 9 yards. And I said, "Well, who are you?" And my mentor could see him as well. And I said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm Clement." And I said, "Great. I never heard of a Pope Clement." He said, "Well, I was number 6." I said, "Okay, how may I help you?" Like, "Why are you here?" And he said, "You're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies." And I said, "I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. I'm not doing that." He said, "Well, you know what happens." First time I saw it was with my own mother in 2002 when she was dying. I can say more about that later if you wish. And he said, "And it's been so bastardized over the millennia, and everybody's so afraid to die, and it's glorious. There's nothing to be afraid of." To your point, Gary, what you were just mentioning. And he said, "And so you need to teach the world what happens." And I said, "Thanks so much for your vote of confidence, but really, I'm not interested. Thanks for stopping by. I kind of see you. Bye." And so I go out to the car to leave a few minutes later, you guys, and I just researched Pope Clement the Sixth. Come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, for heaven's sakes, Ryan, you can't make that up. And so it took several more years before I had the golden ovary courage, because, guys have breast balls and girls have golden ovaries. And so I was sitting in church between my husband and my son. And from the pulpit on Sunday morning, our priest is saying, "Wouldn't it be great if somebody could tell us really if we're escorted to heaven by angels, and and our loved ones' spirits meet us when we get there. And I'm getting elbowed from my husband and my son. And I'm thinking, really, God, from the pulpit, you're giving me grief about this? And so that was the catalyst that finally gave me the courage to, to put this information out there.
And you can tell me if you agree with this. Source has a sense of humor.
Oh, it's hilarious. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
yes, it's always amazed me the sense of humor that comes through.
Yes. Clement, after all these years, one day I said to him, I know who you are. You don't have to wear the Pope hat. And he goes, yeah, but it looks good, don't you think? I said, yeah. Yeah, spirit's hilarious. When I'm working with somebody and we're talking with their deceased loved one, especially if it's their first time, they're expecting some earth-shattering, life-altering advice that's going to just rock their world. And they come in with something that's just off the wall and hilarious and makes them laugh.
Mhm.
Well, what are they doing? They're conveying that spirit is pure joy, number one. Number two, lighten up because life is really not as serious as we make it. And also that they want them to be happy. They don't want them to be in grief and
Right.
suffering because they've died
Just because they're on the other side doesn't mean they aren't just still people. You
and
know,
around you all the time.
exactly. But they're
Yeah,
still people. And,
right.
they're not going to bring you earth-shattering. They're going to give you proof that life continues, let you know that you're loved. And, I think I had a reading like 6 years ago from a well-known medium, and it was so profound and so evidential that I haven't really ever needed another one.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and some people get addicted to it. I
yeah.
have a colleague who, when she works with somebody, especially if they're grieving, she won't work with them again for another 2 years. And
Mhm.
I told her, I said, well, there are only about 5 bazillion other mediums out there they can go to. She said, I know, but I don't want to encourage it because people it's best if they live their own lives and communicate directly. When you're in grief, it's a low vibration, and sometimes it's hard for people to be able to communicate with their loved ones in spirit. And then as grief heals, Sally, I'm sure you experienced that. Tell us about what you went through when you lost your child.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, for me, I was a slow learner.
Oh,
It took me a good long while to begin to uh, process the grief enough that I became more and more receptive. But that's what I was going to give you real big kudos about, because you talk about these heavy subjects with such joy and such lightness of being that it shifts that for the people who are going through this heavy stuff. And so I really want to congratulate you on that, because you're absolutely right. The more sort of embedded you are in the sense of loss, the harder it is to have your own communications. And that's ultimately what we want for everybody, right? We
right.
want them to see that this is not a unique skill set that's just for special people like mediums or intuitives, that it is a piece of being a human being to be able to connect to your own loved ones. And
Exactly.
you do
Yeah.
such a beautiful job of that.
Oh, thank you for
So
that.
thank you.
Well, an easy explanation for that is when we have a thought that feels badly, it's a low vibration. And I equate it to being on like old time country music channels where they're whining about mama, the truck, and the dog. I mean, I call those the I feel crappy channels. And then spirits communicating on the high vibe channels, the classical music, the disco music, may I say. I grew up in the disco era. You can't be in a bad mood and listen to disco music. It's just not possible. Gary, you're laughing. You're probably not too far from growing up in the disco era, right?
Well, I'll be 70 this year, so
Okay, so
I
you
I
even
I
got
lived
maybe so you
I lived
know.
through it, yes. Um,
I saw some college kids dressed up for a disco theme party. I said, I lived in the disco era. We didn't look like that. You guys have wrong information. Anyway, so spirit's always communicating to us, but it depends on where are we tuned. What's our satellite dish head tuned to? It's kind of like when you have satellite TV and there's a storm and the satellite goes out temporarily. Well, that show's still being broadcast. You're just not able to receive it.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to raise our vibrational level when we can, when we're grieving. We need to go through that, certainly. But those low vibration channels, when we feel badly, I call those the I feel crappy channels. And it's harder for spirit to communicate with us on the I feel crappy channels.
No, I agree. And, something you were talking about, people being addicted to having readings. And I know a couple of people like that that go like twice a week to different mediums.
Oh, wow.
I always, tell them you're nuts. Aren't your loved ones tired of hearing from you? I mean, if I
Oh,
talk to you, Julie, every day on the phone, aren't you going to get a little tired of hearing from me? You know?
you know who I heard about that that really surprised me was we had a medium named Sally Morgan on the show, who's a British medium. She
Mhm.
talked to Princess Diana every day, even on Christmas.
Wow.
Every day. And Sally, I'd love your opinion on this just because you've been through this. Research shows that communicating with your loved one in spirits, actual spirit, your loved one in heaven's spirit, is super healing. I mean, it's amazingly healing for
Oh,
people
yeah.
that are grieving.
Yes,
Even for
I'm going to agree with that.
even for people who are not grieving, it's a
Yeah.
profound experience. It
Right.
changes your whole perspective.
Yeah.
Once you cross that bridge, you don't go back.
Right.
Well, and Julie, let me get your take on this too, because for my experience, I mean, I had a couple of early dream visitations, which of course opened me to possibilities. But I first started meditating as a way to assuage my grief, to just get myself separated from it for a short period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
in that meditative state was where I began to get connection and communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that then was a driving impetus to continue not only my own development and my own opening, but to continue my relationship, primarily, I'll say, with my son, because he was the biggest sort of shift in my life. His
Sure.
passing was the biggest change. And it was that process of knowing that I still had a relationship that helped me to integrate my grief, that
Mm-hmm.
helped me to become, you know, healed from that experience. And I still grief for a parent, I think, is lifelong to some
Sure.
degree,
Sure.
but you do learn to weave it into your story. So let me ask you, from your perspective, what does that process look like for people who are deeply grieving? What do you recommend that they do in order to lift their vibration and find their own ongoing connection?
Well, exactly what you did. I suggest that they ask their loved one to join them in their dreams, and then they can have lucid dreams. And I suggest even tell them where you want to meet them. You want to meet them at the corner coffee shop? Do you want to meet them in Tahiti? Where do you want to meet them? And then have that intention when you go to bed. And then in your dreams, they're going to come to you. It may not be the first night. Keep doing it. Remember, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human reality. But what I find is every night when we go to sleep, our vibrational level resets to the factory preset level, which is the level of spirit. And we're not stressed out about what's going on in the day. We're not distracted. We're not in a hurry. We're not whatever, thinking about all the things that we need to accomplish. And so when our vibrational level goes back to the factory preset frequency, it's easier for spirit to communicate with us. My sister passed in 2010 very unexpectedly. And her husband, a couple of years after that, said to me, Joan, my sister's name, he said, Joan came to visit me in a dream last night. He called me. And I said, really? Tell me about that. And he said, well, she was sitting on the couch in the living room and I came down the stairs and she said, well, where have you been? And he said, where have I been? Where have you been? You're the one who's dead. And she looked at him like, what? And he said then they had this conversation and then it went on and he said, but the thing that was really the most interesting part was the next morning when he got up and he was walking down the stairs and walking through their hallway on their main level to their kitchen, the closet light was on. Now, the closet only had her stuff in it. He had not been in that closet since she died, but the closet light was on. I said, that wasn't a dream, that was a visit. And I said, did it seem like I always say that a lucid dream or a visit is the colors are more vibrant, the senses are heightened. It's almost like it's in super high def. And you remember really minute details. Whereas a regular dream is kind of fuzzy and you remember bits and pieces. You remember this. And then the confirmation from my sister was the hall light was on, which I thought was just how terrific. You know
Love
what?
those little validations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we all get them. You know, a medium friend of ours was talking with John F. Kennedy, and he said, you know, we want to help, but nobody's asking.
Yeah.
You know, because they're not going to interfere unless we reach out to them. You made that point earlier, and I wanted to elaborate on that and say, you know, ask them, ask your loved ones for a sign, a visitation, and you'll get it. And like you said, those visitation dreams, they're not like a regular dream because I can't tell you what I dreamed last night, though I know I dreamed. But when I've had a visitation or an out of body experience,
Uh-huh.
I never forget those. I can tell
Right.
you great detail of one from 1995, you know? So they don't go away. And there's your sign that it's something more than just a dream.
Well, and the interesting thing is too that even science has discovered recently, very recently, that lucid dreams are an entirely different brain state from our normal dreaming state.
Oh,
So
I haven't
there's
heard
definitely,
that.
yes, 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 yes. I think I read it in Popular Mechanics, but
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So yeah, I think dreams are a great way for our loved ones to visit. And certainly we can ask them for that. What else besides that? Because I know there are people who said, I never get a dream. I've not had a dream, or they don't remember ever having a dream. And for those of us who have had a dream visitation, it's like, gosh, how would you ever forget? Right.
Mhm.
So if the dream's not happening for them, what else do you recommend to people?
Well, I think what Gary was just talking about, we ask them to send us a sign. Can you, show me, be specific. Show me a pink feather. I have a client who asked her deceased husband's spirit. She plays this game with them, and every day she asks them for something. And she said, I was leaving one day and I said, okay, show me a pink pig or a flying pig or something. Maybe it was a flying pink pig. That was it. And she said she got in her car and she was running to the store. And she said, I promise you, I hadn't been in the car more than 5 minutes. And this plumber's van went by and it said, something about when pigs fly service. And she said, here's this big pig painted on the side of this van with angel wings on it. And so I think that brings up a couple of really important points. Easy for me to say. What you mentioned earlier, Gary, just ask your loved one to send you a sign that they're around you. Number one. Number two, be open to how it's going to show up because it can be in the form of an actual pink pig that flies across a meadow or something, because a cow kicks it. Or it may be a flying pig on a menu or on the side of a van or whatever. One of my favorite stories is I had a client one time and her husband, she said, he's been dead for 6 months and I have no signs. I don't think he's around me. She was so distraught. And I said, well, yeah, he is. And we were talking to him and he's given her all this information, that's just verifiable for her that made sense. And then she said, well, can he send me a sign so I know he's around me? And he said, yeah, look for the peacock. And she said, look for the peacock. I live in Boston. We don't have peacocks up here. And he's saying, look for the peacock. So she was disappointed and we hung up. Within 5 minutes, she sent me an email and she said, as soon as we got off the phone, I opened my computer to my Facebook page. And the first thing that popped up was a full color picture of a peacock with all of his feathers extended. So, great case in point, be open to how it's going to come in. The other thing is, spirit communicates instantly. When we say something to spirit, they're going to answer and it's going to come in like a thought in your head as fast as you can snap your fingers, or sometimes even before. Because back to that time doesn't exist in the spirit world, they've got your thought and they're responding oftentimes before we've even finished with the thought. And that really trips people up. They say, oh, that's just my imagination. Well, no, that's spirit answering you. If you, it's that first thought that comes into your head. If you've thought about it for more than a couple of seconds, restate the question, re-ask the question, remake whatever it is you're saying, and then see what comes in first. A couple of other interesting points. Spirit again is pure love. They're always going to say something that's going to be joyful or at least neutral. They're never going to say anything derogatory or degrading or humiliating or all of that. When people say to me, well, I have this evil spirit following me around and he's saying all this awful stuff, I go, that's your brain. That's not spirit. So,
We
is that
we've been so well, what's the word I'm looking for? The media and
conditioned?
conditioned, thank you. That we've been so conditioned by movies and things that there's absolutely no fear around this. I mean, if unless you allow it.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah. Well, and the Ouija board. Can we talk about that for a minute?
sure.
Oh my goodness.
The Ouija board.
Yes.
The Ouija board is just a way for spirit to spell stuff out. And the Ouija board was the highest best-selling game like for 100 years or something. And as an inventor of surgical devices for me with multiple patents, that thing's patented. So can you imagine? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting with the patent officer, the examiner who granted the patent on that. What do you think happened in that meeting? For him to go, "Oh, okay, this is legit. I'm going to give you a patent on this." That is patented. That's a big deal. And Milton Bradley still sells it. So where it started getting a bad rap was in the Exorcist. They wrote it into the script. Before then, every home had one. We used to use it at slumber parties and try and get each other to levitate and bring spirits in. We never were
And
successful
Well,
at it, but
I think so much has to do with whether or not fear is created around
right.
any given experience. And if
exactly.
you create fear, then you can experience fear as a result of that. But I was going to go back to the signs that we were talking about just a moment ago. And it suggests the possibility that when we ask for a specific sign, that it well may be our loved one who impressed that sign into our mind, knowing that we would come across it later in the day or a couple of days down the road. Because I doubt, I mean, it could have happened, I suppose, that the plumber was just inspired to turn at the right time at the right place, so that the woman would see the flying pink pig. But more likely, her loved one, being very aware of her and her surroundings and what she would be doing, would say, here's your sign.
Yeah.
She thought it maybe was even her idea, but it was kind of orchestrated for her in that moment. Do you
Well,
think that
I
sometimes the way it
agree with
works?
that. Yeah, I agree with that, Sally. But I also believe that there are many people who get a sign like a dime
Yeah.
or a white feather or whatever. And they see it repeatedly, and many members of the family see the same thing. And so we'll say, oh, well, that's dad sending us a dime. One of my favorite ones that I heard recently was a woman's husband had passed, and it was the 10, the dime. She found dimes. Everybody else in the family, all her kids and grandkids found dimes. And the husband's spirit told her he sent her dimes because she's a perfect 10, which I thought was great. But the most incredulous thing was she said she was in her daughter's car and she lifted up the car mat in the passenger front seat. There was a dime in the middle of the floor underneath the car mat.
Yeah.
She said, how's
Well,
that
we also
work?
we also know that they can drop things into the
Exactly.
material world. I mean, Gary and I are very familiar with physical phenomena as well. So absolutely. I think there are some souls perhaps that are very talented at those particular skills.
I
And
agree.
so yeah, they'll use their talents to the best of their ability.
That reminds me, a friend of ours who we have interviewed on the show and was a mentor to Sally, she has a son on in spirit who is an incredible communicator because I haven't really developed my mediumistic skills, but he was giving me stuff and she was confirming it during the interview. So one day he was really good with dragonflies. So I said, okay, JT, let's try an experiment. I said, send me a dragonfly that I will absolutely know is from you today, sometime today. Now I'm in Florida. There are a lot of dragonflies, so he's got to make this specific. So I was down by the lake and I see the largest dragonfly I've ever seen in Florida. And it circled me and began to fly across the lake. And it was halfway across, but it was so big I could still see it. And I said, okay, JT, if that's you, have it turn now and come back to me. And immediately the dragonfly turned and came back. And, you know, you can't make this stuff up. It's
No,
just,
right. Right. So he was sending the dragonfly to you to let you know that that was him who was behind it. That was him with whom you were communicating.
yeah. Well, we
Yeah.
had set up, I had set it up like an experiment, you know.
Yeah.
So send me one that I know undeniably. So it was the biggest one I've ever seen.
Right.
And then halfway across the lake, flying in a straight line, I said, okay, if that's you, have it turn and come back. And immediately it turned and came back.
I love it.
So you can't, you know, they're here and they can do amazing things. So
Exactly.
Let me shift the conversation ever so slightly to some of your other skill set and a question that I have around that. So you're a medical intuitive. So you can kind of scan people's bodies and see information that might be medically significant to them. I also wonder about your experiences with communicating with people who may be nonverbal in some way. So basically, embodied spirits and their ability to communicate. Have you had any experience with that sort of thing?
All day, every day when I'm working. Yes, because communicating with a spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not, is irrelevant. I connect into the person. I'm like a human MRI or X-ray or CT scanner, and I can see, with the person's permission, of course, inside their body. I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, or whatever. And then spirit works through me and with me to help facilitate healing. And the healings that I watch in my mind's eye and witness, both feeling and seeing and perceiving, are oftentimes, Gary, back to your point of spirits are hilarious. Sometimes they really are hilarious. Like I may tell somebody, oh, your elbow looks like whipped cream or something crazy, but it's how spirit communicates to me in a way that we can have a human frame of reference for the energy healing that's happening. And when I first went public with this, I thought, oh, they're going to want to lock me up because I just sound like a nut job. And what I found is that people really appreciate it. And I have had many people over the years say, you explain body parts better than any doctor I've ever been to. And it's just so fascinating, the analogies that spirit puts into my head so that I can describe the healing. When somebody can envision what I'm describing, it helps integrate the healing into their body. Because I believe it's really important for us to remember that nobody heals anybody else ever. We all heal ourselves. No doctor, no medical provider, no shaman, no healer. Nobody heals anybody else. And my analogy I use a lot is think of if you have a big cut in your leg or on your leg and you're bleeding, you're going to go to the emergency room and get it stitched up. Well, that doctor doesn't make your skin grow back, you make your own skin grow back. And that's how all this works. But if the person can envision the healing as I'm describing it, it helps integrate it into their body because the body's going to follow what the brain shows it. To your question also, Sally, about nonverbal people, I work a lot with families who have a loved one who is nonverbal. Perhaps they have Alzheimer's or dementia. Perhaps there's a child that's nonverbal with Alzheimer's, or not Alzheimer's, like autism or something along those lines, and we can communicate with them. Similarly, we do that when somebody's dying if they're not able to communicate. There are always three questions that I ask somebody who's dying. Are you ready to go? Are you in pain? What do you need? And they'll give us that information. So it's really fascinating how they don't need to be verbal. I don't need to be with them. I can find somebody in a galaxy far, far away, sitting on a star, doesn't matter. I had a guy this morning, a client, who said, do I need to be lying down with my eyes closed? I said, no, you can be floating on a cloud. You can be, you know, 40,000 feet in the air, crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It doesn't matter. It's just connecting in with his spirit.
Well, Julie, this has been a delightful hour, and I want to give you an opportunity to leave a closing thought with our viewers. So, what would you tell them if you could tell them anything? So,
Well, what we've talked about before, all spirits are pure love and they're around us all the time. And in order to get in touch with them, all you have to do is think of them. Then
mhm.
you say something either aloud or in your head, and they're going to answer you, and it's going to be the first thing that comes into your head. Also, anybody wants a free copy of Angelic Attendance, julieryangift.com. Julieryangift.com will send you the audiobook and digital. And if you want it in Spanish, you can get that too.
Great. And don't forget about Julie's podcast every Thursday, right?
Right. Ask Julie Ryan is my show. We release 4 shows a week. 3 are interviews. 1 is a live call-in show. We're on all the podcast networks. We have 5 YouTube channels, English, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and French. More to come. And everything's at askjulieryan.com.
Well, Julie, I want to thank you for the incredible work you're doing, and you're helping a lot of people on a large scale, and just sending you lots of love and support for what you're doing. So, thank you.
Right back at you guys.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.